it's a tragedy most of us were made familiar with at a young age during our early school years, the sinking of the unsinkable RMS Titanic after a collision with an iceberg. This occurred on April 15, 1912, during a voyage that was supposed to stretch from Southampton, England to New York City. Only 705 people escaped, joining the ship's fate in the cold Atlantic waters. These survivors waited in the ocean on lifeboats, rafts and debris for an hour and a half before they were rescued by the RMS Carpathia, a ship that picked up on the Titanic's distress signal. The other passengers, approximately 1,500 people, didn't survive this disaster, partially due to an inadequate number of lifeboats. Although the tragedy of the Titanic is widely known, many people are only aware of the basic details. In fact, due to widely spread fictional interpretations of the Titanic, such as the movie by that name, some people are more familiar with imaginary information about the ship than they are with its reality. In the spirit of proving that within this disaster, there were just as many intriguing stories to read about as there were passengers on the ship. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 stories about the Titanic. The message in the bottle. During a life-threatening event like the sinking of the Titanic, panic sets in for the victims. Human instinct urges us to focus intensely on finding a route to safety in any situation where we fear for our lives. Still, there's also a moment of acceptance in certain tragedies, where victims realise the fight won't change their circumstances, and attempt to reach out to their families and say goodbye before their inevitable death occurs. However, as the Titanic sailed far before the invention of cell phones, the victims didn't possess the technology to quickly communicate with people not nearby, meaning the goodbyes of passengers separated from their families would have to be said in thoughts or prayers, leading to less closure for the surviving relatives. One young man, however, named Jeremiah Burke, was able to find a way around this problem and send out his goodbyes in a tangible way during his final moments. Jeremiah was 19 years old when he stepped foot on the Titanic, accompanied by his 18-year-old cousin Nora. Unfortunately, neither him nor his cousin would survive the disaster that the ship was unknowingly sailing towards. Burke had purchased his spot so he could join his sisters who had moved away from him and his family in Ireland to a home in Boston. During his send-off, he received a small bottle of holy water from his mother as a parting gift. It was this bottle that gave Burke the opportunity to deliver a final message to his loved ones. He uncorked the bottle, poured the water out, and slipped a note inside before throwing it overboard. The note, which was tied with a shoelace, read, "From Titanic, goodbye all, Burke of Glanmire, Cork." Over a year later, a man walking his dog on the rocky beach of Dunkettle Island discovered the bottle washed up. Despite the Titanic sinking 400 miles off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada, Burke's bottle ended up being found remarkably close to his family's home in Ireland. Unfortunately, Burke's mother didn't live long enough to witness the discovery of his message, but other members of his family were able to verify it was the same bottle Burke's mother had given him before his departure. Since 2011, the bottle and message have been on display at a heritage centre in County Cork. Hopefully, the miraculous finding of Burke's message provided closure for his family. Survivor reveals there was a fire on the Titanic. You were likely taught the Titanic sank following an iceberg collision, but do you know the full story? Titanic survivor John Dilley revealed shortly after the disaster there was a fire on the ship, and later research suggested that it could have played a major role in the accident. John Dilley was born in London in 1883. He worked as a stoker and went aboard the Titanic to tend the furnace for a monthly wage. He and 11 other firemen were instructed to control the coal bunker fire that was burning in the boiler room 6 of the ship, even though these types of fires are extremely difficult to manage. He recounted this experience to the Stevens Point Journal 2 weeks after he survived the Titanic sinking. According to his report, the fire started in bunker number 6. there were hundreds of tons of coal stored there. The coal on top of the bunker was wet, as all the coal should have been, but down at the bottom of the bunker, the coal was dry. The coal at the bottom of the bunker took fire and smouldered for days. The wet coal on top kept the flames from coming through, but down in the bottom of the bunker, the flames were raging. The stokers were beginning to get alarmed over it, but the officers told them to keep their mouths shut. They didn't want to alarm the passengers after all. According to Titanic expert Ray Boston, the coal fire on board the Titanic actually started during speed trials 10 days before its scheduled departure. However, the Titanic still left its docking point with its passengers as planned. The ship's firemen were not able to get the fire under control during the trip, so they planned to empty the coal bunker after their arrival in New York and call for the help of fireboats. However, they never got this opportunity, and the Iceberg would ultimately be the one to empty Bunker 6. The bunker was situated right above the largest hole the Iceberg tore in the ship. But just because the Iceberg did the final damage to the ship and directly caused its sinking, doesn't mean the fire on board didn't have an effect. The fire was estimated to be 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. This was predicted by Guillermo Rain, a fire science expert at the Imperial College of London. Thanks to the intense heat from the fire, the hull of the ship, which includes the bottoms, sides, and deck, may have been damaged long before it struck the iceberg, making it more vulnerable and susceptible to further destruction. An Irish journalist who studied the Titanic for over 30 years found evidence of this through his investigation of photos taken of the ship before it even began its journey. He discovered 30-foot-long black marks on the hull right at the spot that would eventually be impacted by the iceberg. Engineers at the Imperial College of London were able to connect the mark to the raging coal fire. Another way the fire may have escalated the collision was through its influence on the ship's speed. The Titanic was operating at full pace when it hit the iceberg, above the recommendations for the conditions. Stokers may well have been shoveling as much coal as possible in the furnace to light the fire, which could have caused the engines to work harder, leading to the increase in speed. The extra momentum would have made evading the iceberg far more difficult, and it also would have increased the force of the impact. The fire may have also sped up the sinking process. Even though the iceberg struck the hull, the Titanic designer, who was aboard the ship, believed the bulkhead, the protective wall inside the hull, would hold the water back. However, this had been damaged in the fire, which may have shortened the time it took for the water to flood in. While it's likely the iceberg would have sunk the ship even without the prior harm, it's also probable that with less fire damage, it would have held up for longer. In that case, we might have seen a less devastating fatality rate on the Titanic. If the ship had stayed afloat for just a few hours later, the passengers wouldn't have had to flee the ship before the rescue boat came in. While these theories can give us an idea how the Titanic would have fared without fire damage, it's something we'll never know for sure. As for our brave survivor John Dilly, who originally came forward with this information, he continued to serve as a fireman. In 1922, Dilly was aboard another ship, where he died at the age of 39 after an accidental coal bunker explosion killed him and several other crew members. He was therefore buried at sea. Rigel the heroic dog. The Titanic contained many heroes who either helped rescue others or sacrificed their lives by giving up seats on the lifeboats. Supposedly, among these heroes was a black Newfoundland dog. This dog, who was named Rigel, was said to have saved the lives of some of the people on board at the Titanic. Rigel was thought to have been owned by William McMaster Murdoch, the first officer of the Titanic. Murdoch didn't survive the sinking, but Rigel was able to swim away and started to circle one of the lifeboats. When the rescue boat arrived to rescue survivors, Rigel's lifeboat drifted under the front hull of the ship, known as the bow, putting them in danger of being run down. The people inside the lifeboat were far too exhausted to alert the ship, but Rigel's barks were able to alert Captain Arthur Rostron to the situation, and the engines were stopped. Because of this, everybody in that lifeboat was rescued, and Rigel survived too. Rigel was then allegedly adopted by one of the rescue boat's crew and was taken to Scotland, where he enjoyed a long life. The fact that no survivors mention Rigel in their accounts casts some doubt over whether all the details of this story are true. There's no hard proof that Rigel ever actually existed, but his story was reported in the New York Herald on April 21st, 1912, based on information provided by a man claiming to be his new owner. People have also questioned if a dog can even survive in the cold North Atlantic water for the amount of time it would have taken him to be rescued. However, the Newfoundland breed is known for its ability to function in similarly harsh conditions. Not only are dogs natural swimmers, but their bodies share some mechanisms that combat hypothermia with polar bears. Hopefully, these fascinating details about the Titanic expanded your knowledge and demonstrated there's a wealth of stories beyond the mere iceberg surrounding this famous tragedy. So what do you make of these Titanic stories? Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments section below and help us by growing this community whilst working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.